The quarterly editions of the Price Predictor Index have become one of our most popular products because it gives a very in-depth analysis of what's going on at the coalface of property markets right across Australia. For this report, we do a town-by-town, suburb-by-suburb analysis looking at sales activity patterns and price data for every town and suburb across Australia. And this gives a much greater depth of knowledge about what's really going on at the coalface of property markets than you get from mainstream media, because media tends to provide only generalised data on prices. For example, a single figure to describe the entire Sydney market on prices, or one figure to describe what they call the Australian property market. We go a lot more in depth. We look at it town by town, suburb by suburb. We analyse price trends, we analyse sales activity trends, in particular those with sales activity, the volume of sales quarter by quarter, because this is often a precursor to what's going to happen with prices. Now, a lot of the data on which this particular report, the winter 2019 edition of the Price Predictor Index, a lot of the data on which this is based predates a lot of the recent changes that have impacted positively on real estate, such as the federal election result, the APRA changes, the interest rate cuts, and the tax cuts. So what it means is that in the lead up to the federal election in the early part of this year, there was a negative impact on property markets right across the country because it created so much uncertainty. People don't like to make big spending decisions, such as real estate, in the atmosphere of uncertainty that occurs in the lead up to a major federal election, particularly the one we just had, because it appeared, according to the polls, that Labor is going to win with its unhelpful policies on negative gearing and capital gains tax. So any locations that are identified in this winter report of the Price Predictor Index, any locations identified as rising markets are indeed strong markets, because they're locations that have managed to overcome all that pre-election negativity and still produce strong, positive, upward momentum in their markets. So any of the locations that we have identified in this winter edition as rising markets are worthy markets indeed. Now, one of the other main findings of this report is that the regions, generally speaking, have been outperforming the capital cities in recent times. What the figures show is that regional New South Wales has been much stronger than Sydney. Regional Victoria has outperformed Melbourne, and regional Queensland has been doing a lot better than has Brisbane. Normally, we would expect to find far more growth markets collectively in the capital cities because Australia is so slanted in terms of its population and its economy towards the capital cities. But in this edition, it's pretty much line ball. We've identified 137 growth markets, growth suburbs in the capital cities. We've also identified an identical number, 137 growth markets in the regional areas. Places around Australia like Bendigo in Victoria, Wagga Wagga and Orange in New South Wales, Mackay and the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. When we look at our national top 50, each edition we have a national top 50 supercharged suburbs. These are the ones that have the greatest momentum in terms of their sales trends. In this edition, 30 of the 50 are in the regions and only 20 are in capital cities. And as an example of the contrast between the regions and the capital cities, New South Wales provides a pretty good contrast. Sydney generally, in these figures, still trending down. Very, very few growth markets to be found in Sydney, but across regional New South Wales, growth markets abound, from the Tweed region right up in the north near the Queensland border, right down to Wagga Wagga in the south. Growth markets right across regional New South Wales, similar in Victoria, and there's a growing number of growth markets to be found in regional Queensland. Now, the other trend that emerges very strongly in this winter edition of the Price Predictor Index is about price. As I said at the beginning of this broadcast, media tends to publish only very generalised data on price, a single figure for Melbourne, a single figure to describe Brisbane houses, and quite often a single figure to describe the entire nation, which is very unhelpful, very generalised, doesn't tell you anything that's happening at street level, which is what people really need to know as real estate consumers. So with our town by town, suburb by suburb analysis, what we have found is that In Adelaide, for example, 68% of suburbs have rising prices. They have median prices for the housing market higher than 12 months ago. In Canberra, 68%, almost identical. In Hobart and Tasmania, 90% of locations have median prices higher than a year ago, and are similar in many of the regional areas as well. 60% of regional New South Wales have prices higher than 12 months ago, 61% in regional Queensland, and nearly 80% in regional Victoria. So at a street level, at an individual location level, the price outcomes are much, much stronger than the general rhetoric in mainstream media until recently, which has been telling us about prices falling across the nation. Certainly isn't true. And a further example of that is with the location that we've named in this edition as the National Growth Star. When we're looking at the local government areas of Australia, the precincts, we have named the Brisbane North Precinct as our National Growth Star for a number of reasons. Firstly, the number of suburbs in that precinct which have rising sales activity, but also the outcomes on price. The generalised data published in media would tell us that Brisbane prices have been showing no growth in the last 12 months, or perhaps in the last 2 to 3 years, or only very minor, 1 to 2%. Some figures recently, -1 or -2% for Brisbane. But behind those generalised figures, different things are happening in different precincts, and this is particularly the case in the Brisbane North Precinct, where suburbs like Sandgate and Gordon Park are up 11% in 12 months, and a number of other suburbs are up 5, 6, 7%. So there are always outperformers to be found behind those generalised figures that media tends to publish, and that's what we identify in this report, the Price Predictor Index. The new winter edition is out now. I urge you to get it and read it, because it gives you a depth of knowledge and information that you won't get in media or in any other sources, and I'll give you clues about the places that are on the cusp of growth phases. That's it for now. Terry Ryder from Hotspotting signing off. Let's talk again soon.